All right, we're set to go. I'll hand over to you, Patrick.
Great. Thank you so much, Jennifer. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today or this evening or whatever the case may be where you are. So my name is Patrick Geyer. I'm with Maine Voters Abroad, a state team of Democrats abroad, originally from Thomaston, Maine, joining you today from The Hague here in the Netherlands. And it is really my pleasure to welcome all of you to this very special session with our own Governor Janet Mills. First, let's go to our Democrats Abroad International Chair, Candace Carrison, to help kick us off. Candace, over to you.
Thank you so much, Patrick. And hello to all of you tuning in around the world. Maybe you're up late, maybe you're just starting your day on the West Coast. Wherever you are, welcome. We're glad that you're here. And before we dive in, just want to say thank you to Patrick and Christine, who you'll see in just a moment, and Jennifer for all of their work organizing today's event. If you aren't familiar with Democrats Abroad, we are indeed a part of the Democratic Party, and within the whole Democratic Party ecosystem, we're responsible for finding, mobilizing, and helping the 6.5 million eligible voters who are living outside of the United States. So that includes US citizens, it also includes dual citizens. If you have US citizenship, you can vote. And we're here to help you do that. We're also here to help get Democratic candidates elected, like Governor Janet Mills, who is up for election for the governorship in Maine. And we know when you look at the map, right, you know that races are going to be close. We saw that in 2020. We're going to see that again this November. But we also know that we made a difference in 2020. The votes that came in from abroad were the margin of victory for President Biden in not only Arizona, but in Georgia as well. And so as we've approached our work this year again and engaging voters like you and voters all around the world, even with that mindset, right? We know that we can make a difference. And we're here to use these remaining 23, 22 days. We're all a little bit of brain fog right now. We're here to use every single day through November 8th to get out the vote and get fantastic Democratic candidates like Governor Mills elected. So before we dive in, I do just want to say that if you have your ballot, please return it immediately. If you vote out of Maine, you actually are able to return it through a secure electronic method. So you can send it by email, you can send it by fax. Again, you see that states where we have Democratic executives, like in Maine, like in my state of Pennsylvania, they make it easy to vote. We need to keep these officials in office so that we can keep exercising our right to vote from overseas. So if you have a ballot, please get it back. If you don't vote in Maine, still please get it back. And make sure that every single person you know, think of your family, your friends, of your coworkers, if they are a US citizen, they can vote on November 8th. And please do everything you can to get them to vote on November 8th. Every vote is going to count more than ever this time around. We know that, but we also know that here on October 17th, the future is in our hands. The outcomes that we see when we wake up on November 9th, that is still in our control. So let's use every single day between now and November 8th to make a difference, to get great candidates elected who value democracy, right? Who value a woman's right to choose, who value environmental protection. The list goes on. The choice could not be clearer. So please make sure you vote and help others vote. We have some fantastic volunteer opportunities with Democrats Abroad. We're calling Maine voters who are living abroad right now. You can plug into those projects as well as all of the other battlegrounds. We have campaigns running to Georgia, Arizona, and Pennsylvania. Again, these must-win races where you can participate in a real impactful project. Contact these voters. No one else is, by the way, and make sure that they're voting. If you don't have time to volunteer, please encourage you to donate. Again, support our programs right now. We're spending anywhere between $10,000 and $20,000 a day on our outreach, again, through targeted digital ads, phone banking, postal mailings, texting programs to these voters for must-win races. So anything you can contribute to that is going to go a really long way. So Thank you for tuning in. I will turn it over now to Christine. Christine is our chair in the newly formed Democrats Abroad Caribbean Islands Country Committee, and also active in the Maryland State team. So thanks again for being here, and I'll toss it over to you, Christine.
Thank you, Candace, and welcome everybody. It's very exciting to see where everyone's coming from Bangladesh to Portugal, all over the place. But I'm introducing Governor Mills. Governor Mills is the first woman governor of Maine. As governor, she has led Maine through a global pandemic with nation-leading results, including one of the highest vaccination rates and one of the lowest death rates in the country, protecting the lives and livelihood of Maine people. Governor Mills was born and raised in Farmington, Maine, where she still proudly lives, the granddaughter of Aroostook County potato farmers and the daughter of a longtime high school English teacher and the U.S. Attorney General for Maine, who was that in the 50s. She learned the value of hard work at an early age, venturing out early every morning to deliver newspapers along her route and serving meals in the evening at the local diner. She graduated from Mount Blue High School in Farmington and the University of Massachusetts at Boston, and then the University of Maine School of Law. Prior to becoming governor, she served as the Attorney General of Maine and the first and only woman to hold that job. As governor, she's fighting to see that every Maine person has affordable, high-quality health care, that Maine has a strong economy with good-paying jobs in every part of the state, and that every Maine child has access to a world-class education, and that Maine is a place where families can put down roots and raise kids. So thank you and welcome, Governor Mills.
Hi, Christine. Thanks for organizing and helping organize it. Hello, everybody around the globe from Maine. I too was once a Democrat abroad many years ago. I had the privilege of living in Paris for a year and going to school there. And there I am. And when I was 21 years old, so a long time ago, I hitchhiked through Europe. I couldn't afford hotels and trains and planes, so I hitchhiked, backpacked, and stayed in hostels. And it was a growing experience, a learning experience, I got to say. But anyway, thank you all of you for joining the call. I've been going around the state, every town and city and county across the state of Maine, campaigning and also talking about what it is to govern. It's really exciting to me to hear from so many people. Most recently, we've been talking a lot about education and climate change and healthcare. In particular, the fellow who's running against me, my predecessor, who wishes to be my successor, seems to me kind of stuck in the past. I really feel like we lost 8 years of progress under his tenure. 8 years of progress on education, 8 years of progress fighting climate change, 8 years of progress on the economy, and 8 years of progress on healthcare. And if you recall, the people of Maine actually voted by an overwhelming number to expand MaineCare in Maine and take advantage of 90% federal funding for healthcare. And he wouldn't, even after the people voted, he wouldn't let that happen. He vetoed the bill 5 times that would implement Medicaid MaineCare expansion. For my first day in office, I issued an executive order that did exactly that. And we then had more than 60,000 people who got healthcare, access to healthcare, who didn't have it before. And I just thank God we got that done my first year in office before the pandemic hit. We also had time to rebuild the Maine CDC. If you remember, my predecessor had just decimated the CDC. He had laid off dozens and dozens of public health nurses. I mean, who doesn't like public health nurses, right? And so I had the first year under my belt to rebuild the CDC and hire a guy named Nirav Shah to come to Maine and head up the CDC. And thank God we had that under our belt before the pandemic hit. So we did a lot. In the last 3 years also, working with the Democratic legislature, we have fully funded the state's share of education for the first time in history, in more than 18 years since the people voted to expand the state share of education to 55%. We finally did it. We got it done with state funds. And we increased teacher pay first year in office. It was about time, and it should go higher. We fully funded this year universal food in the public schools, universal free meals for all kids in the public school system. I think we're only the second state to do that, maybe. And we also funded 2 years free tuition at community colleges for all recent high school grads, and greatly expanded the Opportunity Maine tax credit to welcome back to Maine people who've traveled, people who've gone to school somewhere else, people who have degrees and or certifications. Come to Maine, pay taxes in Maine, and we will forgive your loans up to $25,000 over time. So it is one of the most generous student loan forgiveness programs in the country. And I'm glad we got that done this year with the help of a Democratic legislature, and actually a bipartisan budget. We also provided one of the most generous inflation relief packages in the country. We gave back almost 60% of the surplus that the state budget had achieved in the form of $850 checks, $850 to almost every taxpayer in the state of Maine. I get cards and letters from people all the time who tell me, thank God I got that check. Now I can fill my tank with oil. Now I can pay the $350 co-pays for my prescription drugs that's been piling up. Now I can pay my grocery bill. Now I can put tires on my car before winter. So all these things are happening in the state of Maine, and there's just so much more to do. The next 4 years, we're continuing to work on broadband, getting broadband out to the far reaches of the state of Maine. We've already made 35,000 connections in just the last year or so. 35,000 additional broadband connections. So that's something. We need to work more on that. Funneling the federal funds that Senator King and Senator Collins obtained for Maine to do that. Expanding education. Again, the CTEs, for the first time in history, first time in 18 years, we funded equipment at the CTEs and broadening the curriculum for the community colleges. We want to make sure that we have the workforce of today and the workforce of tomorrow. Just recently, my very creative Commissioner of Education took some federal money and said, we're going to buy computer science mobile computer science labs and put them in every single school from pre-K to 12. Every public school is going to have a computer science mobile lab, like a cart, and teach the teachers how to use computers and how to teach computers too. So we're doing some interesting things, some creative things. We have issues to deal with. We've got workforce issues here in Maine, of course, and elsewhere across the country. We have inflation. High cost of heating oil is going to be a real hurtful circumstance this winter. Going to be very tough on a lot of people. So we're working to combat that, working to get people's homes weatherized, working to get money in people's pockets so they can pay the oil bill, working to get more LIHEAP money out there and more low-income assistance, and small businesses, provide a tiered system for small business reimbursements for heating costs, thanks to legislation that the legislature passed this year. A lot of other things we're doing, and getting off of heating oil over the long term. In the last couple of years, we had a goal of installing 100,000 heat pumps. We've actually done 80,000 so far. So 80,000 heat pumps is a pretty good deal. And we're moving forward on that. There's a lot we're doing on healthcare. We provided dental care for people on Medicaid this year. We expanded healthcare in many areas. On abortion, which is on a lot of people's minds as I crisscross the state of Maine. My position on abortion has never changed, never wavered. I have never flip-flopped on that issue. For more than 50 years, I've held the exact same position. I will defend a woman's right to choose. And as long as I'm governor, my veto pen will stand in the way of any effort to modify, repeal, or deny a woman's right to choose women's health care, reproductive health care, including abortion. My opponent, my predecessor, who wishes to be my successor, has always been of the opposite view. He's been very vocal in that respect. Now he's kind of trying to waffle. Now he's saying things like, well, abortion, I don't really have time for that. Or abortion, he said, it really affects so few people. And it reminds me of another individual who convinced the US Senate that he was in favor of precedent, that he would support precedent, would never deny a woman's right to abortion. And yet, when Brett Kavanaugh went to the US Supreme Court, we got the Dobbs decision that completely overruled Roe v. Wade. So I'm concerned about that. I want to make sure that our fundamental rights and freedoms are protected, preserved in state law. And so when the Dobbs decision came down, I actually issued an executive order that protects providers here in Maine from getting sued, protects providers from being harassed by people from out of state who have different laws on the books than we do. And it'll protect women coming here to Maine, seeking abortion, seeking reproductive health care, who might be harassed and sued and intimidated by people in their own state. So I'm about protecting those rights completely. And I see there are a lot of people in the chat room now and talking about phone banking. That would be great. People who can phone bank and volunteer. But the main thing is we got 22 days, and on my watch, 6.5 hours till election, till the end of election day here in Maine. So the sooner you get your ballots in, if you haven't already, please put it top on your priority list. Wherever you are, the Postal Service may not be that efficient. So please get your ballot in the mail or send it however you have to send it. And make sure your voice is heard. I would love to hear from every one of you about what you're doing and where you're doing it, but I know there's not that kind of time in the schedule. Please be assured. My goal is to enhance our economy, enhance our healthcare, enhance our educational opportunities. I've been in this office almost 4 years. We've gotten so much done, and there's so much more to do. I have 5 grandchildren here in Maine. I married a widower. Stan, my husband, who died about 8 years ago, was a widower with 5 daughters when we got married. They were ages 4 to 16 when we met. And those little girls are all grown up and they have children of their own. I like to hang out with my youngest granddaughters, 3-year-old and 6-year-old, and they like to tell me what's on their minds. Hey, Nana, I drew a picture for you. Hey, Nana, I lost a tooth the other day. Hey, Nana, I learned to tie my shoes. Want to see me? So I know what's on their minds, and it's wonderful to share time with them. But what's on my mind always is, what will their life be like? What will their opportunities be like 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, when Lord knows I'll be gone? Will they have the same fundamental rights that I've had for 49 years? God willing, as long as I am governor, they will. But will they have the chance to go to a good school their entire young careers? Will they have a chance to breathe clean air, drink clean water, move forward on climate change issues, as we have been doing for 4 years? Will they have a chance to get a good paying job and a career that they find fulfilling and purposeful here in the state of Maine? Will they be able to raise their own families here in a safe and nurturing environment and enjoy our beautiful natural resources? It's for them that I'm running for office again, running for reelection, and for every child and grandchild who might want to be in Maine, or who is in Maine, who should be in Maine, to help us stay a safe and welcoming state. I'm proud of what we did the last few years. There's a lot more to do. We handled the pandemic by telling people the truth day after day after day, whether it was good news or bad news or unknown news, just telling people the truth, and they listened to us. I think it's for that reason, and because Nirav Shah is such a good messenger, Maine now has one of the highest vaccination rates of any state in the country and one of the lowest death rates from COVID of any state in the country, despite having the highest average age. So we've done a lot together, cooperating, listening to the people, working with the people. In fact, the Commonwealth Fund rated 2 states the highest of any states in the country in our response to the pandemic, Hawaii and Maine. Now in Hawaii, all they had to do was close their airport. So I think we were actually number 1, not just 1 or 2, but number 1 in the country for how we dealt with the pandemic. Our economy is rebounding. We are 11th highest state in the country for economic recovery. And guess what else? 7th highest in the country in our in-migration rate. People are moving here. People are coming here. It shows in the real estate prices too, but people are coming here because they know that we are a safe and welcoming state, and they are raising their families here. They're working remotely. They're working in the green economy with green collar jobs. They're doing interesting things and diversifying our aquaculture, forestry, and farming. They're doing great things, and I want to make sure we stay on a path to progress. So I certainly want to open it up to questions and concerns. And I see, oh, the donate link is already up. Yay. Deb Simpson, holy cow. And thank you, Chris Bursting, for organizing. I hope the play went well, the Clarence Darrow play this weekend. I wish I could have made it. I'd love to have time to do those things again, but I am I feel good about this campaign, to be honest. Gotten good responses, but I'm not leaving any stone unturned. And there's only 2 ways to win an election: running scared or running unopposed. And I am not unopposed, so I'm running not scared, but confidently. And I hope to have your help. Please, if you haven't voted already, send the ballot in, however you have to do it, and vote for Democratic legislators up and down the ticket as well. Please, thank you. Somebody has their hand up.
Governor Mills, let me just jump in, first of all, to thank you so much for making time to join us, taking time out of your very busy schedule. You mentioned leaving no stone unturned, and I'm glad you also didn't leave Voters Abroad out of that equation. And as you can see, there's a lot of interest coming through the chat in supporting your campaign and doing everything that we can to contribute to your reelection campaign. It's really an honor to have you with us, and it's great to hear about your achievements in the last 4 years. We look forward to many more in the 4 years to come. Looks like we do have some questions. I'm going to be moderating this session, so if you have a question for Governor Mills, please put that in the chat, and we'll get to as many as the governor has time for. Maybe just to get us started, I did want to ask you one thing. So you mentioned your opponent, who many of us know comes with, well, shall we say, some history and some baggage. I wondered if you could say a bit more about who you're up against, what's at stake, and has he changed since the last time we saw him in public life, or is this the same character that we have become familiar with? Governor Mills, over to you.
Thanks. Well, you know, the person I'm running against is Paula Page, my predecessor, who was governor for 8 years. Many of you lived here at the time, and so you know a little bit about him. And I don't want to disparage him, but I will just say nothing's changed. Nothing at all has changed. There's just a scattershot series of absolute lies out there in the social media and on TV, you know, mudslinging stuff. And it's part of the national playbook, I guess, to blame every Democratic governor for inflation, as if we told Putin to invade Ukraine. I don't think so. And to blame us for everything that people might feel is wrong with the country right now. And so we're fighting back. It hasn't been a fun campaign in that sense. I love a good debate on the merits, a debate about fact and policy. That's what I like to do. It hasn't been that kind of a debate or that kind of a conversation with my opponent. He's been making up things on the fly in a scattershot fashion. My frank opinion is he's distracting and deflecting and full of disinformation. like some other candidates are. But that's my opinion. Nothing's changed. He's still, as far as I can tell, he's still interested in drilling for oil off the coast of Maine. He's still not accepting climate change as a reality. He's still not for healthcare. He's still not for fully funding education. I'm not sure what he is for, but there you have it. And thank you, Patrick, for organizing.
Thank you so much. We have a question in the chat. If you can stick around, from Frank
Sure.
Purdy from Cape Elizabeth, currently living in Quebec. Bienvenue. The question is actually two things. One about expanding broadband. You mentioned expanding broadband in rural Maine. Maybe you could say a bit more about what's been achieved in the past 4 years and what your plans are in the 4 years ahead. And also about protecting voters' rights. I should mention we had an excellent event with our wonderful State Secretary of State earlier this year, which was absolutely fantastic. But can you say something about what Maine is doing to protect the right to vote? Thank you.
Sure. We created, a year and a half ago, created something called the Maine Connectivity Authority. We immediately appointed the members to it, and they've been working hard, hired staff, and then the Congress appropriated a lot of money through the infrastructure, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and we're funneling that money into Maine and looking at every region, every town, helping them determine what the best kind of infrastructure is for their particular area. But not only that, it's not only picking fiber companies or picking what kind of infrastructure, or picking just satellite apparatus, but making sure that the monthly fees are affordable. It's infrastructure and affordability. So you know that Maine has been a challenge for private providers because we are the most dispersed population of any state in the country, including Alaska. We don't have large cities. So we got a rural dispersed population, which makes it financially not very profitable for companies to do broadband. And we have those funky peninsulas that some of you live on and come from that stretched out as 3,500 miles long. And it's not financially feasible, profitable for any private enterprise to do that on their own. So we're funneling that federal money into the regions to help buffer their own sometimes municipally owned broadband, sometimes a partnership with a particular company, sometimes another, and to make sure that whatever deal they strike on their own is affordable for the individuals. If we have plans, if people end up with plans that cost $100 a month, a lot of Maine families just can't afford that. So we're helping bring down the price and doing the infrastructure. Just in the last, I think it's a year or so, we've made 35,000 additional high-speed internet connections. We're also working with groups to do a lot of digital literacy to make sure people know how to work from home, create telehealth opportunities from home, teleeducation for kids and adults, that kind of thing that we learned is so valuable. We learned during the pandemic. I'm looking at the chat. Stevie Orestes, how are you, Steve-O? Oh my.
Shall I paraphrase for you, Governor? Steve was very patient, which we appreciate, and mentions an issue which is near to the hearts and pocketbooks of many of us abroad, which is the federal FATCA regulations and what that does to our access to financial services abroad. That may be more of a federal issue, but I wonder from a state perspective, are you aware of some of the binds that Maine residents abroad get caught in terms of double taxation? Is that on your radar? Would you like to speak to that, Governor Mills?
Well, no, no,
Fair enough.
I'm reading now and I'm saying, oh my, I would like to learn a lot more about it. A voice for expat taxpayers. FACTA is causing chaos, Stevie says. Chaos for many of us, especially when it comes to retirement planning using foreign investment funds. My daughters are unable to open investment accounts with any banks in Norway where we live due to FACTA. I am not aware of that issue and I'd be happy to look at it. Obviously, we don't want you to be double taxed, and we want you to do your retirement accounts in a fair way. Interesting.
Steve, thanks, and we'd be happy to put you in touch with our taxation task force for Democrats abroad, who can tell you all about that and what we're doing.
Oh, there you go.
That topic. Let's go to another. Absolutely. Let's go to another question, though. So, of course, the environment's come up, and maybe the balance of how we strike the balance between protecting Maine's natural beauty, our natural resources, while also growing an economy that works for all people of Maine. I wonder if you could share with us a bit about your plans for your second term as governor, which we all very much hope you will have, and also where does fighting climate change come into that? Where does the transition away from fossil fuels come into that for you, Governor?
Yeah, thanks. Look, Maine is really handicapped by being the highest user of fossil fuels for home heating in the country. 60% of our homes rely on oil for heat. And that's the average nationally is about 4%. So we're way out of whack. And we send about $4 to $5 billion a year out of state, out of our pockets to the big oil companies for home heating oil. That's about $4,000 per person, per man, woman, or child in Maine total. And what we're doing with Hannah Pingree and what I call the Office of the Future is using federal money and settlement funds to provide rebates for alternative heating sources like heat pumps, heat and cooling pumps, provide weatherization support, and just helping people get off of oil, and businesses too. We created a legislative break for small businesses to get off of home heating oil. Yeah, and in the long run, we're also investing in wind. The University of Maine's engineering program and the unique designs they have for floating offshore wind are something we want to push. We have an application in front of BOEM right now for a research array for floating offshore wind. And we hope that that is acted on favorably so we can determine what the effect of offshore wind is on marine life and the fisheries and industries that rely on the Gulf of Maine. So we want to do that before the big commercial push comes down the pike, because we don't own the Gulf of Maine, but BOEM could easily lease out hundreds of acres of the Gulf for commercial development without having done the research first. We're involving lobster fishermen and other marine scientists and marine resources users. They are at the table looking at the research array and how we can analyze that. That's one thing. Solar power, when I first took office, we created some of the broadest renewable portfolio standards in the country. And we went to net energy billing, which my predecessor had vetoed. And we've seen almost a gold rush of solar investments in Maine. And eventually we've got to get off of gas and oil. Most of our electricity is generated by gas, which is very expensive. So ultimately solar, plus with solar and wind with battery storage, will go a long ways to not only fighting climate change, getting off of fossil fuels that emit greenhouse gases, but also saving people money in the long run. We're also doing community resiliency. We have an action plan that my Climate Action Council put together about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago now, that includes all the information we have about transportation, home heat, and community resilience. We're working with communities around the state to make them more resilient to climate change, including violent storms, rising oceans, and warming seas. So I could spend a couple hours talking about that, but I won't. Just to let you know, it's high on my list of things to continue pursuing in the next 4 years. And it's really unfortunate that we lost 8 years of progress in that area before me.
It's great to hear what your priorities are on those very important topics, Governor Mills. We have a question coming in from Deb Simpson asking if you can speak to the number of homeless individuals in Maine and what are the plans to help and assist that community. And maybe also if anyone else has a question for the governor, I'm not sure how much more time you can spare for us, Governor Mills, but if anybody else has a question, please drop that in the chat now. So Governor Mills, over to you on the question of homelessness. Thank you.
Depends on whether Deb Simpson has another question. No, I love Deb. I wish I was in Portugal many of these days. Gosh, envy her being there. But yeah, we are working on homelessness issues. It's a severe problem in some, particularly Lewiston and Portland and Bangor, but elsewhere too. I see it all over the state. And what the legislature and I did this spring was to appropriate $22 million in emergency housing funds to help get people off the streets. Then, knowing that some people who are unhoused also have mental health issues, some people who are unhoused also have substance use disorder issues, we appropriated $750,000 for wraparound services to provide basic services to people needing that kind of help. That money is out there. I hired Greg Payne about a year ago to be my senior housing coordinator and advisor. He's working with the cities and towns to make sure that people aren't left out in the cold this winter, that they have appropriate housing. We're using a fair amount of that money right now for asylum seekers and other people who don't have a place to live, putting them up in motels for now. The city of Portland has a new shelter coming online next spring. We're helping in the interim house people over the winter, make sure everybody's safe. So we're doing a lot. It's never enough, but we're out there doing what we can.
Thank you very much for speaking to that. I'm just joined by a future Maine voter here behind me.
Hi.
And maybe one last question, unless there's another burning question from the audience. Yeah, Christine raises a point that we wanted to come to. So you mentioned safety in your remarks, Governor. I think one question that many of us abroad get all the time is, what is up with America and gun violence? So a question to you, what will you do in your second term to help keep our communities back home safe from the scourge of gun violence, recognizing, of course, that compared to many states, Maine is doing comparatively well. But what are your thoughts on this very important topic, Governor?
Thanks. What we have done is to bring people together, and we got the NRA, the Sportsmen's Alliance, law enforcement, forensic psychologists, pro-gun, anti-gun advocates, all at the table at the same time. This is 3 years ago now, and we spent, I mean, frankly, Derek Langhauser, my then legal counsel, spent hundreds of hours bringing groups together to formulate a bill and to get it passed. That is what's sometimes called a yellow flag bill, which allows, and my concern is more about suicide than anything else, because we do see a high rate of guns used for suicide. That's very concerning. So we want to get guns out of the hands of people who are posing a danger to themselves or others. So we drafted a law that got consensus by all those groups, and got through the legislature with I think a near unanimous report in the Senate and about 136-9, I think, in the House. We passed a gun bill, firearm safety bill. So that was big. And then we got some pushback from the hospitals, and this year we have funded telehealth measures to help get the counseling component of that bill done. This bill was touted by in the US Senate as being a model for other states, and they have now appropriated money to help us with the mental health aspect of that kind of bill as we implement it in Maine. We also created in statute and fully funded the School Safety Center to make sure schools are prepared without getting into panic mode, prepared to deal with any threats of violence. And so then we also funded a tax, I think it's a tax exemption for firearm safety measures, such as gun cabinets and whatnot, lock cabinets and whatnot, to make sure people who do have guns in their homes can lock them up and keep them away from people who would misuse them. That's among a number of things that we have done in the last almost 4 years. Looking forward to doing things by consensus, as we've done pretty much all along, to make people safe and secure in their homes. And by the way, in terms of the crime rate, the FBI came out with their statistics 2 weeks ago, showing that Maine has the lowest violent crime rate in the country. Let's hope and pray that it stays that way. Thank you, Christine.
Absolutely, and thank you very much, Governor Mills. That's great to hear. I think that I don't see any other questions coming into the chat. I wonder if you have any last words for us to leave us with in this very important election year. Any last reflections from you, Governor Mills?
No, I wish I was doing all the kind of travel you folks are doing. I envy you. Your lives abroad, it must be so interesting. I wish we could have a big meeting when you all get back, and you will get back, right? Okay, because you're always welcome here. This will always be your home. Thank you for what you do. Don't forget to vote if you haven't already. Make sure all your friends do too. Hi, Steve-O. Good to see you.
Hey, thank you so much, Governor Janet Mills, for taking the time to join us. This has been a great session. Everybody, if you could give a virtual hands to the governor, and we wish you very well with your re-election campaign. Folks, please do stick around because we have a few more items to address, including critical other races happening this year. And in fact, I have seen in the lineup there, we are also joined by our colleague. Let me just get my notes in order here, but we have our colleague joining us from Maine's 2nd District. And I'd like to ask Dan Jenkins, Organizing Director for Maine's 2nd Congressional District, to jump in and please tell us a few words about the ME2 race and Jared Golden's re-election. Dan, over to you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation. It's always a challenge to follow someone like the governor, who's an excellent advocate, but I will do my very best. Love seeing so many folks from the 2nd District chiming in the chat. I'm calling you here from a little gray and dreary Lewiston, Maine, but I'm very happy to be speaking with you all. As you're probably all aware, we are in a challenging race here. Congressman Golden is running for his re-election in a district that former President Trump carried by about 7.5% in 2020, sending an electoral vote to that presidential campaign. The congressman is the Democrat who holds the most Trumpy or Republican district that currently is in Congress. He's done that by reaching across to voters of all political stripes, supporting the Democratic leadership and the Democratic president when he thinks it's in the best interest of the state, but he's not afraid to speak up when he doesn't think so. It's a critical race to maintain the majority for the Democratic Party in the House of Representatives. I'm not quite sure exactly which district will be the tipping point, as they call it, in determining who holds the gavel. But you'd be hard pressed to think of a better candidate than this one. So it's all a very critical race here in Maine too. It is a bit of a redo from 2018. Where Congressman Golden is running this time as the incumbent against the former incumbent, former Congressman Bruce Poliquin, and one of the same independents is in the ballot, a Portland attorney named Tiffany Bond. We will be using the ranked choice voting. If you've already cast your ballot, you've probably seen that. We are hopeful that Congressman Golden will win on the first round, but in the event that we do not go, that nobody gets 50% in the first round, whomever comes in third will be eliminated and their votes will be distributed to that voter's second choice, which is what happened in 2018. It's all hands on deck now. As you probably can imagine, 22 days to go. I'm gonna put a GOTV phone bank call list sign up. It says from Golden for Congress, but it is for all of the party. We're just hosting the mobilized link, so don't worry about that. It's to help the governor win her re-election. It's to help Senate and House candidates all across Maine's 2nd District to keep the majority in the State House and the State Senate, which is also critical to helping the governor achieve her missions this year. I am obviously not the congressman, but I'm happy to try to answer any questions that you may have on his behalf. By way of background, I was in his official office for about 3 years, from 2019 till July of 2021, and I was on his campaign back in 2018 as well. So I know the guy pretty well. Happy to do my best, and if I don't know the answer, I'm happy to defer and try to get you a response after the fact. But thank you.
Dan, thank you so much for joining us. And great to have that update, and also the explainer on ranked choice, which I know continues to be a bit of a head scratcher for some people, although many of us have worked with that and seen the benefits. Any questions for Dan Jenkins on behalf of Jared Golden's reelection campaign? You can put that in the chat or hands up as well. Be happy to call on folks from the audience. Anybody? All right, well, I think Dan will stick around. If you have a question for him, you can also message him directly through the chat. Thanks so much for sharing the link also to Mobilize. So good moment to come back to phone banking. This is one of the best tools that we have, especially as voters abroad, to help turn out voters. We can also use that to turn out voters back home. So if you join that Mobilize link, you'll be connected to ways that we can phone bank from wherever we are in the world, helping turn out folks back home. And we also have lots of opportunities to do that with Democrats Abroad, where we're obviously calling other Democrats abroad. And there's plenty of opportunities and lots of need to be active on that. So please, if you're interested, we've dropped a couple links in the chat earlier in this hour. We could do that again. We do need, thank you very much, Jennifer. We do need a lot of help on phone banking, and that's an extremely effective tool to help turn out the vote both abroad and back home. And thank you again, Dan, for joining us. Good to see you, and thanks for your comments on Maine 2. In the time that remains here, I do want to just share a couple of things. So of course, we've just talked about Maine 2. Of course, there's another big congressional race this year in Maine's 1st district. Representative Shelley Pingree running for re-election. And of course, we just heard from Representative Jared Golden's campaign in ME2. But don't forget all the other races too. So the entire Maine State House and Senate, where Democrats are defending majorities in both houses. There are elections all across the state for our local representatives as well. And I think we've all learned in the past decade how critical those races are, regardless of how small those districts or how seemingly low profile those races. They do count for a lot. So please do pay attention to those down ticket races. The fact that they're down ballot doesn't mean they're any less important. So please do look out for those as well. And I also wanted to just share with you a couple things about voting from abroad. The good news is, especially for those of us voting in Maine, that it's easy. I think Maine is definitely one of the best states for voting from abroad. And believe me, there are some states that make it much harder than it needs to be. So you can request your ballot today if you haven't already from votefromabroad.org. That's votefromabroad, all one word, .org. We've dropped that in the chat already a few times, and we will again. And in Maine, you have the option to choose electronic delivery of your ballot, which is a great option. So you don't have to worry about interruptions in the postal service or long delivery times. Request your electronic ballot, and you can return it also electronically, quickly and securely. Please note that in Maine, the registration deadline is the day before Election Day. So the registration deadline is Monday, November 7th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And if you need help, we can share with you one resource from the State Secretary of State's office. They have a special email address, uokava.cec@maine.gov. That's a helpline specifically for voters abroad. So please don't be shy to make use of that. If you have any questions that you're struggling to find an answer to or encounter an issue at any point in registering to vote or requesting your ballot. And that is really the main things that we wanted to cover today, besides being sure that you do get out to vote. As we've said many times, this is the most critical and important thing this election cycle. We need all hands on deck. We need everybody to turn out, whether you're back home in Maine or abroad. And we can do it. We know that we can. So get your ballot today. Tell your family and friends, colleagues, classmates abroad, but also back home in Maine, also back home in other parts of the US, that voting this midterm year is really, really critical. And most of all, we want to thank you for spending this time with us today, this evening, whatever it is in your time zone. We are Maine Voters Abroad, a state team of Democrats abroad. Please keep in touch with us at me@democratsabroad.org. Thank you, and a grand merci to all of our speakers today, and also, and perhaps especially to Jennifer von Estorp, who's done a tremendous amount to help pull this together. Thanks also to Christine, Dan, and most of all to Governor Janet Mills. So thank you very much for joining us. Wish you all a success with registering to vote and casting your ballots. And let's keep Maine blue in 2022. Thank you very much, everybody. It's been a pleasure to share this event with you. And this has been recorded.